Saints fans and who that's from all over the world. It's time for the Bayou Blitz, y'all. With Bob Rose and Kyle T. And special guest John Hendrix.
Happy Wednesday, New Orleans Saints fans, fans of the NFL, and especially fans of the Bayou Blitz. We want to thank you for having us into your homes and over your airwaves again on another spectacular Wednesday night. I am Bob Rose. I am going to be one of your co-hosts to the Bayou Blitz podcast this evening. Joining me is my partner and my good friend, and who should be the number 2 quarterback behind Drew Brees, Mr. Kyle T. Mosley. How are you tonight, Kyle?
I'm a little sick right now. I'm kind of sick. Stomach rumbling, tumbling, and bumbling. So I can't get my arm straight. Where's my glove? Where's my glove? You got my glove? What's happening, man?
Hope you're doing well tonight down there in Houston, Texas, Mr. Mosley.
No, Bob, it's hot. It's hot right now. It's real hot, man. I got to be honest with you guys. It is a steam bath right now down here in H-Town, man. And it just feels like every time I walk outside, I'm in a sauna, and the humidity is just heavy. It's just hitting you like a truck, you know. But, hey, that's the part about being down on the Gulf Coast, baby. You know, hey, you got to live with it. Indeed.
And just keep telling yourself that, you know, we do have a wonderful distraction this time of year. It's more than a distraction, really. Most likely anybody tuning into the show, the New Orleans Saints become your life outside of family. They become your life from mid-August until hopefully early February. And as you all know, the Saints had a preseason game number 2 against the Los Angeles Chargers. I would never get used to saying that. Yeah. Against the Los Angeles Chargers this past Sunday, and are now preparing for preseason game number 3. A dress rehearsal of sorts for most NFL teams. In the Saints case, they are going to line up across from an old friend and the New York Jets this coming weekend.
Yeah, you know, it should be a good one. The Jets are an improved team, and you can see it in how they're playing. You can see how the young man Darnold is playing as well. I think he's going to be one of these quarterbacks you need to watch out for in the next several years to be one of the elite after Drew and Tom Brady and those guys go sailing off into the sunset. So catching some fish on the weekends. But, you know, when you look at the Jets, you also have to respect that defense that they're bringing as well. And we were able to get DeMario Davis from those guys, but they have a young, talented crew. The young man from LSU, Jamal, he's exciting, you know. So we're just going to have to see how everything translates out on the field on this weekend against the Jets. It's one of those games that everybody's looking forward to because it's the 3rd game of the preseason, and that usually means that Drew Brees will be making his debut. So we should see what's happening there, man. I don't know. I don't know if I really need to see Drew. And I keep on saying that. I said that last year, and I'm saying it again this year. How do you feel about
it? Pretty much the same. I'm like you. I expect to see him go for a couple series. But Kyle, as you know, in years past, NFL teams always used this 3rd preseason game as literally a dress rehearsal for game 1 of the regular season. Oftentimes, starters or the starting units would go well into the 3rd quarter. But over the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't seen as much of that. A lot of NFL squads will hold, just like the Saints did with the Chargers last week. A lot of NFL teams have elected to start holding joint practices, with one of their preseason opponents, and that gives the coaching staffs for these teams more of an opportunity to control the action. They get to, kind of sit down with each other ahead of time and agree on, hey, this is what I want to see out of my team today. They get to control the reps, as opposed to regular preseason action. And as a result, you don't see the Drew Breeses or Tom Brady's or some of the upper echelon stars go as long into that preseason game number 3 as what we used to. Having said that, I do expect Drew to suit up, probably get 2 or 3 series in him. And if, Coach Payton and Drew like what they saw out of themselves in those first few series, then the top players will probably again have a seat for the evening. That includes Art Breeze, Michael Thomas, probably Alvin Kamara, Teron Armstead, Cam Jordan, all those guys. We know the names, and they do that, of course, to prevent any possibility from injury, which is one of the things that you keep your fingers crossed about your team every preseason is, hey, just let's get to the regular season without any serious injuries. And in the Saints case, they're starting to mount up a little bit, Kyle. Nothing major, knock on wood, nothing major and nothing to a top-end superstar. But the linebacking unit and offensive line in particular, they're starting to get a little bit nicked up on those number 2 and 3 units, and it's starting to worry you a little bit as far as depth goes.
Yeah, Robertson, he was nicked up. Anzalone is having, a shoulder issue a little bit. I know they signed the guy from D.C. I'm not going to say their team's logo, but, he came in and they signed him this week as well. Look, this is football, and we saw what happened to Clark, which was heartbreaking. Clark is a McDonald 35 Ron Eagle, go Ron Eagle. And, they had to put him in an air cast, which meant some really bad news. That's all I'm going to say there. But we've got to be able to understand that we need some depth, right? And right now, it might be a good time to show that depth with these young guys, who's going to be able to step up and be able to fill in. You saw Caden Ellis. He did a pretty good job at middle linebacker for the New Orleans Saints against the Chargers. And, can these guys keep on keeping on at this time? Or should we just rest for the next 2 games, Anzalone, so he can be able to heal and be ready for the season opener against the Texans? I think that's pretty much how they are taking this, as a cautiously, anticipating his health to get better by that particular time. So, I don't know, man. I think when we look at the offensive line, the one position of immediate need as well as immediate concern is that left tackle spot. Who's going to be the person to be able to step in and help out, to really be behind Teron Armstead, because he has had the propensity to be injured every year, right? So for at least a game or 2. So let's see if we can be able to make sure that we find the right person to be able to fill in that spot, especially with Ulrich and Clark being out due to injuries the past 2 games.
Yeah, you're right. Ulrich, John, the backup offensive line did not play well at all in the preseason opener against Minnesota, and probably the best of the bunch as far as the backup tackles were concerned. Ulrich John went down with injury against Minnesota. It caused the team to put him on injured reserve and then subsequently waive him from injured reserve with a settlement. But they, in response, then signed Chris Clark, like you pointed out. And Clark, we expected to be in heavy competition for that number 1 backup tackle job. Good starting experience. Obviously going to be a drop-off from the play of Armstead or Ramczyk if Clark had to step in, but serviceable in my opinion. And then, unfortunately for that young man, he did go down with injury against the Chargers, as did Michael Ola. which is key. And I don't know how serious the injury to Ola was. He was able to walk off under his own power. But Ola has experience with this Saints team in the Saints system, having played for them last year. And even though he wasn't playing particularly well, you do get concerned about the depth at that spot. Because, again, like you pointed out, you're not going to have a number 3 tackle nearly the caliber of a Teron Armstead or a Ryan Ramczyk, but you'd like not a severe drop-off in play if they had to step in for a couple games. Now, instead, we are looking at a scenario, again, where the most likely option would be moving Andrus Peat from his left guard spot outside to tackle if something were to happen. And Pete found a home at left guard after being drafted as a tackle in 2015. And Pete is so much more he's one of the better guards in the NFL. And what you do if you have to move Andrus outside, you end up weakening your line in 2 spots, because the player that would step in for Pete at guard, in this case probably Nick Easton, again, serviceable, but you get a drop-off in play. So now all of a sudden you have a weaker link at tackle and inside at guard. And you need this line to stay, A, as healthy as possible, and B, like you said, depth is so important. You need that line up front, the big uglies, as some of our friends, some of our former NFL player friends used to call them. You need those big uglies to protect your 40-year-old quarterback and open up holes for your dynamic running backs, Kamara and Latavius Murray. And it starts up front. Any coach will tell you, you win and lose football games in the trenches.
What's concerning also, like you said, if they have to slide Pete, Pete, his feet are not as swift. And his hands, I'm really concerned, even at guard, man. The way he played on some of the series against the Chargers really were concerning as well. How he was reaching. What does that say? Is it that his feet are not following the play as well, and they're not catching up to responding how he should respond, especially after 5 years in the league? That's a concern to me. Will Clapp hasn't really stepped up. Easton really played poorly. I think Bobby Hebert and Michael Detillier, they talked about that on their Monday broadcast on WWL, and that's a concern, man. If a lot of people have been noticing the drop-off in how he's playing, guess who else is doing that? Some defensive coordinator. That's really one of the things that we have to really keep an eye on, Bob, is how these guys are really playing. Now Cameron Tom, he's been playing pretty well. I don't know, and we may have to look at him as the next guard up. With all the money we're paying Easton, you would have expected a better performance, because really he was penciled in to be the center compared to Max Unger. Well, that hasn't really translated out well for him there. So you have McCoy coming in. The rookie has been very good thus far. You do expect some rookie mistakes that will occur, but he's played pretty heady football. So I like what I see there. But Bob, when you look at the talent across the board, we'll get a chance to see all of the starters on this weekend. However, like you said, what's going to happen in case of? What's our insurance policy? And always when you have an insurance policy, it's not as great as the original, right? But it's in case of we need to have it. And then let's see who can be able to be that person, Clapp, I thought he was going to do a lot better this preseason, and he really hasn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was very excited about the interior depth at the offensive line spot. You mentioned Eric McCoy being drafted specifically to take over that starting center spot, and it's all but his at this point. But then bringing in Nick Easton to be the center before they drafted McCoy. Now, by default, Easton would be your swingman inside, that all-important spot that Senio Clemente used to play for so many years, and be well used, might I add. But Easton hasn't been up to the task. I agree with you. I expected a step up in play from Will Clapp, and thus far this preseason, early on in training camp practices, we saw Clapp perform well, but he seems to have plateaued a little bit. And as far as that top spot inside, I agree with you. You got to give it to Cameron Tom at this point. But Tom is more suited to be a center. It's just like you kind of pointed out. And although he could capably play a guard position, he's not as versatile as Clapp and Easton are set up to be. And we need, this team, this coaching staff needs one of those two young men to step up and really take that role, because you like to go too deep there, because you want to have a consistent backup at center and then another guy that you can move around if you had to, like the team used to do with Clemente. And right now nobody is stepping forward to take that spot.
Yeah, no one's stepping up forward, but I'm pretty sure the Saints, especially after this third game, you're going to have some guys that are going to be released from some teams, and some guys given some opportunities to be able to call home elsewhere. And I believe they're going to keep their eyes open to the waiver wire to see what's going to happen Monday or Tuesday of next week. And we may have some new guys coming in. So I'm not too concerned at the moment. It is a concern, but I'm not overly concerned.
No, and I'm with you. And we're talking about backup spots. The starting five along the Saints offensive line, Pete does need to play a little bit better and more up to his natural capability and skills, like you pointed out. But that starting five along the offensive line is as good, if not better, than any in pro football. The unit that I have to outline concerns me the most, and I know you're going to agree with this, just based off of their play through the first two games and those joint practices with the Chargers, is on the defensive side of the ball. It's your last line of defense, and that is your defensive secondary. I'm not even going to point this finger specifically at cornerbacks and or safeties. I'm just going to circle that whole unit as being very concerning to me right now.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it on our recap, right? And there are a few areas that really are going to have to be addressed. How their performance were in the games wasn't really high. And Eli Apple has to do a better job, bottom line. And I know Mama Apple may get mad at me for saying this and everything, but he has to do a better job, man. I don't understand. Okay, so when I played ball a little bit on the street, you can't always look in at what is going to happen with the quarterback, man. You got to play your man. And I don't know how many times you hear that over and over and over again. These guys still do the same thing, Bob. That's what's so just bewildering, to see a professional player keep looking in to the quarterback instead of looking at what your man is doing. And guys get behind you quick in this league. You cannot think that you're just going to catch up with the guy, especially with the speed and the talent wide receivers have. So, hopefully, man, I just hope that we can see these guys play a little bit better in the next couple of games. I think Marshawn Lattimore is right on target. I like what I see out of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Patrick Robinson, he's been up and down. Von Bell has been outstanding. Marcus Williams has been. I think we need to put an FBI report out for him, MIA. And I'm just being honest, man. I know he, as the safety, has been much maligned by some people. I believe in the kid, but I don't know. Sometimes things can get in your head too, and I just need to see him perform a lot better. If we look at the defensive line, I think Trey Hendrickson is outperforming Marcus Davenport. Let's be honest. You look at the reports on a day-to-day basis, how he's performing in training camp. He performed very well. You saw he had a couple of pressures on the quarterback, even though he didn't get there. And Marcus Davenport, I haven't seen much of a flash here or there when he's on the field. So maybe that changes in game setting, and sometimes that does happen. I just haven't seen it. And I know this game, we've got to see something, man. Well, that's for Sean Payton and those guys. Maybe that 3 defensive end lineup that they had with Okafor last year, maybe it's Hendricks, Davenport, and, of course, Cam Jordan going to be doing the do. But I just like to see a little bit more out of him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, Cam, I don't think Cam played at all against the Vikings. And if he played against the Chargers, he played very little. When he's in the lineup, he's going to draw. I'm sorry, go ahead.
He didn't play. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right. When Cam is in the lineup, he's the one that's going to draw the double, sometimes triple team blocking, and free up his defensive line and linebacking counterparts up for single man blocking. So that is going to make a big difference. But Marcus Davenport, you were drafted with the 14th overall selection. Not only that, but the team that drafted you, the New Orleans Saints, gave up a small fortune in draft capital to move up and get you. They did that because they feel that Sean Payton and company feels that you have the capability and ability to be a game changer along that defensive line. And although we saw flashes of it from you last season, Mr. Davenport, we need to see more, like my partner, Mr. Mosley, just pointed out. Now, nobody is ready to label you as a draft bust or anything like that yet. So if you're listening to this, don't panic, because I know, Kyle Mosley and Bob Rose's opinions mean so much to you. But we do need to see a little bit more from you. And Kyle, I got to be honest with you. If I'm lining up against the Houston Texans on Monday night in week 1 of the NFL regular season as of right now, and I'm Coach Sean Payton, Trey Hendrickson is going to get his name written down as the starter. And I'm going to use Marcus Davenport in pass rush situations, or, as you just pointed out, in that NASCAR package where they like to use the 3 defensive ends and their 2 fastest linebackers with a couple extra defensive backs. In third and long or obvious passing situations. But Trey Hendrickson, at this point, he's earned the lion's share of the snaps. Now, Davenport still has 2 games and a handful of practices to change that opinion and to work his way back into the starting lineup. But the expectations of the New Orleans Saints as a team, and this young defense in particular, one of the things that those high expectations is based off of is the production and the potential of the 14th overall draft pick last year, and he just isn't quite there. I don't know whether he's a little bit slower to pick up the learning curve, or whether he just got to go out and play, whether he's suffering from paralysis by analysis, as our friend Willie Whitehead maybe pointed out a couple of weeks ago to us. But we do need to see more from him up front.
Look, the kid is a smart kid. And usually your sophomore season is when the lights usually start to come on a little bit more after the first few games, Right. Due to injury, he was out, what was it, 4 games, 5 games last season? I think when you listen to the press conference that Trey Hendrickson had, he said it himself. That second year, he was dinged up a little bit. He was a healthy scratch for quite a few games. And this season, he had a different focus, right? So I'm not saying this is what Marcus Davenport is going to. He's kind of in that middle bubble type of deal. I don't think he's a bust at all. I'm pretty sure once we get into some real game action, so you got some guys who just, that's what they need. They need to, get me in the real game, coach, and they turned it on. So I'm not saying he's a bust, and guys they have to cool out with this bust talk, in my opinion. A lot of our fans have to cool out with the bust talk, even with Teddy Bridgewater and things to that nature. It's just difficult in the preseason sometimes, Bob, to really get a good feel and understanding of a guy. There are just some guys who they just perform better when the lights are on. You got some guys who are just like they're pretty sorry at playing to these down low type of games. So it's not really for them. And I'm not saying this is the case as well, guys. I'm just saying, look, let's see what happens when Monday Night Football hits and the Texans visit the Superdome. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Kyle, let me ask you this, and I know our friend John is going to join us in a few minutes to give us his expertise on what he's taken in so far. But all off season, everybody has put the New Orleans Saints at the top or near the top of the heap among Super Bowl favorites, you and I included. Based off of what you've seen so far, taking in mind what you just said about preseason and how, in the long run, how meaningless it actually is, have you seen anything to make you change your mind and say, you know what, maybe these guys aren't who I thought they were?
No, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel that way. Now, this is what I do feel, and I'll be honest with you about this part. They sucked when it came to their special teams coverage. You can't have that.
Yeah.
They sucked when they had a need for some energy under Teddy Bridgewater. Taysom Hill, how do I say this? Some guys have it. Just have that it factor about them. That something about them that people gravitate to, that will play harder for, or would just sometimes when they make a play or two, people respond, right? I think that's Taysom Hill. And is he the next Steve Young or Steve Young-ish or whatever? That's debatable, man. There's a lot of football that still needs to be played. But to answer your question, nothing has made me say no or make a major pause. It has been our major concern the past 3 to 4 years that defensive backfield has to play better. Bottom line. You're facing Will Fuller is not even practicing. You're facing Deshaun Watson and Hopkins, right? And I've watched the Texans preseason games. They don't have really anybody other than Hopkins that's really dangerous, in my opinion. But there are other teams that are dangerous. LA, dangerous. Dallas, dangerous. Seahawks, dangerous. We have dangerous games on our schedule that first quarter of the season. If these guys, speaking of Apple, Marcus Williams don't play better, that's a concern of mine. Saquon Hampton has been injured the past week or more, right? That's a concern of mine because he was having such a phenomenal camp. It would have been easy for them to move him into that position. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has played very well, and you're going to get what you're going to get from P-Rob right now at this juncture of his career, especially coming off that injury, right? So all I'm saying is this, Bob. Until I see Drew Brees and those guys can't convert those red zone opportunities into touchdowns, like we were having problems early part of the year again, and that's going to be a problem. The Saints have been inside the red zone. Was it 2 out of 8 times, and we only converted 2 out of? 8 times we only converted 2 out of 8 times. That's a problem, right? So that's what I'm talking about. You can't have those turnovers in the red zone area. You can't have fumbles. I don't think you're going to have a fumble like that from an Alvin Kamara or Murray like you had from Ozebo. So, and you're not going to have a guy totally miss a block to let the linebacker freely attack your running back. So those are the things you need to clean up on, man. And let's see how these guys perform against the Jets. Then I could be able to answer how I believe the team is going to perform the first quarter of the season. Okay, that's my thing, because right now I got them 2-2 if they keep performing the way they're performing.
Yeah, and I think that we're not revealing any deep, dark CIA type secret to Saints fans when we say that this team needs to get off to a fast start to the regular season. Not only when you look at their schedule and the division that they play in, but realize that the NFC, at least on paper, the NFC is the more loaded of the two conferences when it comes to power teams and legitimate championship threats. This team, obviously, and I'm jumping way down the road here. Obviously, we have seen teams come from the 5 or the 6 seed or have to play on the road through the playoffs and win a championship. But that's not the suggested course of action. Any coach and any player will tell you, we would rather be one of the top seeds, play our games at home, not have to play that extra wild card week. Well, to put yourself in that position, as we saw from the Saints each of the last 2 years on each side of the spectrum, you have to get off to an early start. You have to win your winnable games. You have to hold serve at home. And you just have to play your ball game. And going 2 out of 8 in red zone scoring opportunities is not going to win you most football games. Now, like you pointed out, Kyle, that wasn't with Alvin Kamara or Latavius Murray carrying the ball. That wasn't with a Drew Brees throwing to a Michael Thomas, with Ryan Ramczyk, Larry Warford, et cetera, in front of him. So we are talking about different units, but we are talking about the same football team. And there's missed opportunities, as you, Barry, and myself pointed out on our post-game recap on Sunday. Those missed opportunities, regardless of who is on the field, that's what's going to drive the coaches crazy, because you have to finish. You have to finish drives. You have to finish ball games. You have to, otherwise, you're not going to have the opportunity to finish seasons. And that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Not only that, I'm going to go back to the first preseason game against the Vikings. What concerned me was Michael Thomas. And I don't care. I think he may be getting back to that Michael Thomas of the past couple of years. But what I saw, and I'm not saying the money has changed him already, guys. I'm not saying this. So please don't burn my pictures and everything else. Yeah. All I'm saying is I've seen him make some catches at practice, the past couple of training camps, when he got back to it, you could see he's a little off. His timing was a little off. His catching was a little off. He should have had that touchdown with Bridgewater thrown to him against the Vikings. He was a little off. It was debatable the defensive back, had pass interference, but Michael Thomas usually would snag that ball. You feel what I'm saying? I want to see the guys who mean something perform well. Alvin Kamara, in my opinion, the past couple of games, I don't really need to see much of him. Murray, I think he performed very well as well the past couple of games. So I think our backfield, we're good. Jerry Cook hasn't had many opportunities. I think we're going to be fine there. Josh Hill concerns me still with which Dan Arnold is going to show up, right? So Irby, he had a couple of good little plays here and there. So, I mean, you look at the offensive weapons and what we have, we should really be right there at the top of the NFC to say, yes, the Saints are going to return back to form. But are we? You still have to play the games. And if these young talented teams are hungry just like you are, especially early in the year when people are still kind of fresh, right? And not as nicked up. So you have a Houston Texans team that has a lot to prove right now, a lot to prove. You have a Seattle Seahawks team that they need to perform up to their level and caliber, and Russell Wilson has been given some pretty talented guys at wide receiver this year now, right? You have a Dallas team that's vying for it. You have an L.A. Rams team. They're trying to make sure that they can score more than 3 points in any game now. So, I mean, we have challenges that are coming down the pipe facing us the first quarter of the season and more, really. So the Saints do not have an easy road to tread this particular season. And I think we have John Hendrix on the line with us. Bobo? John, that's you?
Yes, sir. Hey, man. How are y'all doing tonight?
Good. Hey, this is Bob and Kyle, man. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you accommodating me, and sorry I'm a little late.
No, that's okay.
Anytime you get to join us with your expertise, my friend, is certainly welcome. I hope you're doing well down there. Thank you for taking some time away from your family and your other duties.
No problem at all. I'm happy to do it.
I got some questions for you, John, so let's go.
I may have some answers. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Kyle, fire away. You first.
Okay. All right. John, I know you've been at training camp and you've seen these guys firsthand. Should the listeners know that Trey Hendrickson's rise is something to take note for the Saints?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And, the best part about it is you're seeing it translate in the preseason. So, and what I mean by that is, so I think everybody can remember last year that Corey Fuller was one of the guys, the stars of camp, and a guy like Emmanuel Butler has kind of stolen the limelight this year in training camp and such. And, what I mean is the fact that you can see these guys do so good in training camp. You can see them get them so hyped up. And then when it comes to, games, that they just kind of disappear, right? And, or just don't do anything. So for a guy like Trey Hendrickson to be able to show out and just, it's not necessarily, again, it goes back to the adage of how do you grade Cam Jordan or how you grade Marcus Davenport, that most people say, well, he only had this many sacks or he didn't have any sacks, so he had a bad game, which is not fair. But, Hendrickson being able to push and get his bull rushes off and get his type of pass rush in the mix. I mean, he's a guy that's playing so well right now that it's really going to be hard for him to keep off the field. And, ever since this team had lost Alex Okafor to Kansas City for free agency, I mean, they needed a guy to step up. And look, Davenport is obviously he played hurt last year with the foot injury, got it corrected. But they're really going to need a rotational pass rusher to come in and be able to fill in and kind of help disrupt the quarterback and such. So, look, I think it's encouraging what you're seeing out of Trey Hendrickson, and I only expect it to keep growing from here.
And, John, you mentioned Davenport, and Kyle and I were talking a little bit about him too. I don't think anybody in their right mind should be ready to label him a bust. But would you say Davenport is a bit behind where coaches expected he'd be at this stage of his career?
Well, look, I mean, again, it just kind of goes back to what is his true valuation? Are we saying because he's a first-round pass rusher that, he should have had 15 sacks last year or 10 sacks? And, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is a guy like Vic Beasley, right? He was drafted by Atlanta. He was expected to set the world on fire. His first year, he did not. But his second year, I mean, he's a huge reason the Falcons were able to make a Super Bowl run is the fact that he was able to improve and mature as a pass rusher. And, obviously I don't really care to use the Falcons as an example, as your shining example here. But, I think that's what you got to look at is see what his growth is year over year. And, again, you got to recognize that, for fans, I get it somewhat frustrating because you give up the draft capital to get somebody like him. And you just don't see the production. But, when you look at some of the films, especially when he was completely healthy, it was evident that he knows what to do. He knows how to be a force in the run game. And, look, again, it's, I guess, a double-edged sword because if they just put him on IR because of the injury, then you'd say, well, geez, he didn't really do much the first year and he, kind of wasted the pick there. And, he plays hurt, and we're still arguing saying that, hey, well, he's just not living up. But, look, I think as far as his development and everything goes, you talk to Cam Jordan and other guys, they'll think the world of him. Ryan Nielsen thinks the world of him. And look, I think he's going to be a huge reason why the Saints team gets back in the playoffs. He's going to just set it another level when it comes time that he's really called upon.
Now, John, you had mentioned Emmanuel Butler a minute ago. And, we have seen there's kind of a logjam at the back end of that depth chart at that receiver spot. We know what Butler has done in practice. We have seen it or read about it or heard about it every day. But Cyril Grayson, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and even Simi Cobb and Austin Carr have all had different pretty good moments either in practice, multiple practices, or the games. If you put your ear to that locker room right now, would you have a guess as to which one or two of these young wideouts has the top edge for a roster spot at this stage?
Well, it's hard to say obviously there, but look, when you look at it all, I mean, the best thing that happened to these guys is the fact that, they released Cameron Meredith, and then they also had Rashard Matthews abruptly retire. Because, I mean, look, Matthews, if he would have worked hard and stuck with it, I think he would have had a spot on this roster personally. But, just because he's a good veteran. But, his work ethic just came out, and unfortunately he's not a part of the equation. And, you're hoping that outside of Ted Ginn Jr. and Michael Thomas that you get the leap from Traquan Smith. You think that Keith Kirkwood is a guy, I mean, he's been hurt, so he's obviously had a little bit of disadvantage because he hadn't been out there as much. But you think those two are going to kind of elevate their game. But, at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if they move on from a guy like Kirkwood. Simi Cobbs Jr. is a real interesting player to me. Just because he spent some time in Washington, I think they had a lot to like on him. He's a guy that I've seen that's made some plays, and obviously, you look at it, I think he's obviously a guy that, you're just going to get that inconsistency, right? And for me, Austin Carr is a guy who's been on the roster. We keep thinking he's going to make this move and do some things. And I think it really just boils down to what the Saints look at from a depth chart, right? Because, you might go run into the first game of the season with 4 or 5 wide receivers, but Then you got Deontay Harris, you can't forget about suddenly, because he's looking really, really good in the return game. And, obviously he's a wide receiver by position, kind of like a Tommy Lee Lewis. Maybe you ran some gadget plays for him. So, I think even with everybody gets wrapped up in these 53-man roster predictions, but there are so many moving pieces that happen between you making the final roster and that first game against Houston, where even if you make the roster, you may not stay there. Butler's a guy that has got to turn it on in these final 2 preseason games, or else he might just get the dreaded, the hope that they can slide him on the practice squad and hope for the best. And Grayson's another guy I think has got a leg up in this competition because of the speed, and he just keeps making the plays in preseason and in training camp.
Now, you talked a little bit about Kirkwood. The injuries look like the bug has really hit the Saints right now a little bit, especially on the defensive side and offensive line. Do we expect anybody to come back? Have they said anything about what's happening with Robertson's injury and Anzalone?
Yeah, look, I tell you, with him signing Will Compton, I don't think that's a good sign from Craig Robertson. Everything that I'm hearing and what I'm finding out, the longer it lingers, the worse it's going to be. And obviously, Deuce McAllister overheard that he had heard something pop. So I don't think that fans can expect anything good to come out of that. And with Anzalone, I think it's encouraging to see him just kind of around and in the mix. But at the same time, look, you're seeing a couple of red flags here. I think that they have been getting extended looks at Caden Ellis for a reason, just because he's been a guy that's been able to be all over the field and such. So, again, you're wanting, obviously, your top 3 is Klein, Demario Davis, and Anzalone, and especially in those nickel formations, you want Davis and Anzalone there because of speed. You don't really want Klein in those situations. So, look, I don't think it would be surprising to see what happens to those chess pieces and things that fall out, especially with these cut downs now going from 90 to 53 instead of that 75-man roster cut down. That, look, somebody comes available, certainly the Saints will be looking at them. They may take a look, and Compton's a guy who's brought here to be on special teams. Vince Beagle's another guy that's special teams. You just really don't want him to be thrown out on the field. So, look, it wouldn't surprise me to see some more come up. The injuries to the offensive line have been absolutely crazy. I think some fans alluded to it, but, if I'm the Saints, I'm making an immediate call to Jermon Bushrod, just be like, hey, buddy, how's it about pump in the back for a little bit?
Yeah, look.
Because, they're in that kind of mode because, Chris Clark, he's got that feel-good story, comes in, 3 plays, he's done for the year. So, and that's, I think, the 3rd offensive lineman they've lost so far in the preseason.
Yeah, I've been watching Bushrod on Instagram. He's loving retirement too much right now. Let's go back to the special teams here. We talked a little bit about Deontay Harris, Cyril Grayson, I'm sorry. And now you got Sherrills, who's been out. We paid him a lot of money. He's been an outstanding performer in this league. Now he's coming back from injury. What's going to happen there, John? What the battle between those 3, or should we just say Grayson is pretty much going to be the odd man out?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. It's just looking at the way the rosters go. They wanted Sherrills for this punt return duty, and obviously he was going to see limited snaps on defense, right? So it's just one of those things now that, you lure a guy like that, but you weren't expecting somebody like Deontay Harris to just do what he's doing. Real good story, has a lot to offer. Again, you're talking about a veteran versus a rookie here. But, look, it wouldn't surprise me. The Saints have obviously thrown money around before and it not yield a good return. We know that with Jarius Byrd, Junior Gillette, guys like that. And obviously Sherrills doesn't have that big of a contract, but with him not being able to be on the field and to be able to do much, it's giving a guy like Harrison really making a choice saying, hey, Sean Payton, look, we know Sherrills is a veteran. He's a proven guy that can help you in the return game. But also, here's this dangled toy with Deontay Harris that you can also use on offense. I think it's more leaning to Harris in his favor right now.
Yeah, I still like the speed of Grayson at times as well, but I see what you're saying. And one last thing, any word on Saquon Hampton? Is he coming back from his injury treatment, or what's going on?
With Hampton, I haven't heard too much on that. And, this is a guy who was making some good plays in training camp. So, look, I think again, with the Saints, obviously you're going to get the hush-hush. I mean, that's just how it works around here. Trying to find out much information is just so hard. And, look, this is a guy who can help on special teams. I think that we kind of saw some of the blunders in special teams against the Chargers, which I guess is good. So much over pursuit. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you talk up his performance on special teams. I don't think that's necessarily indicative on him as a football player, but, Hampton's the guy I think that was kind of inserting himself into dime nickel packages for you. I think he was really playing some good football. You hope it's nothing serious, but at the same time, we had the mysterious disappearance of Emmanuel Butler, and then, come to find out it's a foot injury, and that's kind of what set him back. And, I think the Saints are smart about not trying to rush these guys back onto the field until they're completely ready. So it's going to be another one of those situations for him too.
Hey, Bob, one more question for John. I'm sorry, John. And that leads me to, what's that kid? Alizé Mack. Our tight ends, we need them to be spectacular this year. And it looks like he had some flashes here and there early on in training camp. Then he's been injured for the past couple of weeks. Any thoughts on him? Is he coming back, or is he one of those guys that may be headed to injured reserve?
At this point, Dan Arnold, as many people don't want to hear, he's been playing really pretty good football. Look, I think Mack is missed a ton of time, obviously. Look, even A.J. Derby is a guy that you never really would have thought would have done too much, but he's kind of made some different types of moves. And, again, this is one of those things where, look, he's back to practicing, and, you just hopefully want to see so much from him, but you're going to have such a short time to see it. And, I think that they like a lot about him. I think that they want him to do well. But clearly when you look at it, it's Jared Cook, Josh Hill, and then Dan Arnold right now. It just depends if they're going to roll with 4 tight ends. I could see that going into the Texans game. Whether that's Mack or Derby remains to be seen. But, again, Mack's a player. He's got to turn it on really quickly if he wants to try to find a spot on this roster.
John, before you joined us, and I'm actually working on a piece that I'm hoping to come out tomorrow, outlining some different units or squads that might be concerning to us at this point. But I want to ask you about the secondary. Are you concerned about that unit as a whole right now? And B, my favorite topic, bubble players. Patrick Robinson, P.J. Williams, Chris Banjo, where do you see those guys right now?
Yeah, look, I think some of the secondary is a concern. I think what I saw against the Chargers, there was some miscommunication. I remember there was a play over to the tight end underneath that Lattimore kind of got a little bit upset about after the play because somebody missed the communication. And then one of the other plays that it kind of baffled me from an alignment is you got a 3rd and short situation where Crawley is specifically playing like 9 yards off the receiver. And then the next play on 1st and 10, they're playing press coverage on both of the receivers. I'm like, you kind of got that backwards a little bit, in my opinion. I get some of that, but, those are things I think are obviously going to get cleaned up for him. Look, I think Crawley's a guy that, look, I know Sean Payton really likes Crawley, but at the same time, if they see something that, a pressing need, I wouldn't be surprised if they dangled him out as far as trade bait. Again, you just don't know what you're going to have with him or what you're going to get as far as offers. But something like that just wouldn't surprise me. I think Crawley belongs on the team. I think P.J. Williams is also a guy. Robinson is obviously the guy that you want to throw in most of the nickel situations right now. But again, you've got a good problem on your hands when you've got, four corners that, five corners that look really, I don't want to say you're fully confident if they're on the field, but again, you hope nothing happens a lot more. But if you're throwing in somebody like Crawley or throwing in somebody like P.J. Williams or Patrick Robinson in the mix, I don't think you should feel bad about that, as opposed to what we had a few years ago with Corey White or, Stanley John-Baptiste. I mean, those teams like that. But look, I think there's a lot at the end to sort out, and that's why, people say preseason is meaningless and stuff. These are the things that you want to see. You want to see what these units are going to look like, what they're going to have happen. Banjo's a guy who plays really good special teams. I think, when they didn't have, Raphael Bush and they didn't have an extra safety when they let Kurt Coleman go, it's chances for guys like Banjo to step up and do some things. And, look, I think there's opportunity for everybody here. And again, it's going to come down to that final chess piece of saying, are we going to get more of the defensive backs this year? Or are we going to get more linebackers in it? And ultimately, it's going to make your mark on special teams. That's what's going to dictate whether you make this roster or not.
Yeah. Is a guy like are guys like Kayvon Webster or we know what Justin Hardy is capable of on special teams. Both of those guys play cornerback as well. Are they making a case defensively to possibly overtake a guy like Crawley, or is their competition just too tight to call right now?
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought up Justin Hardy, because I don't think he gets enough credit for playing defensive back. We just see him more of a special teams guy. But look, I think he's looked pretty good. I mean, and again, he looked good last season. I think there's things that you take into account that, look, I mean, that if they were to move on from somebody like, Crawley or P.J. Williams, they'd obviously feel better about what they have. Kayvon Webster is a veteran in this league. And, again, we don't fully know what the extent is, what you're going to get with them. And, it hasn't been really bad or negative. I mean, the guy had a bad pass interference called against them, and that was very suspect. So that would have been one that you should have overturned, because I don't think there was enough there, obviously. But, right. I mean, it's just a curious case of what you have here. And I think that, I look at Arthur Millette. He's a guy that, was around, and I thought that would take the next leap. And, he gets a starting gig over in Indianapolis and does pretty decent, but then he gets let go and ends up back with the Saints, and then he signs with the Jets. So, look, I think that you got to be careful when you evaluate this final roster. And guys like Hardy, I think he's got a stamp on this team. But, I think because of the way he's played some, that he could earn more snaps. And a guy like Webster, he's a veteran in this league. I know there's a lot of respect there. But, what do they do? Do they stick with him and try to trade Crawley or trade Williams? I mean, I think you can get some type of value out of those guys. And, with them not having to trim down straight to 75 and just go straight to 53, it'll be interesting if there's any type of roster movement before final cuts.
Do you expect to see how much of the starting units do you actually expect to see against the Jets this weekend?
Hopefully not much. I'll take one or two series, and that's about it. Just because I think about what Greg Williams was able to do against Matt Ryan last week. And hopefully that's a good sign of the Falcons' offensive line and not necessarily a thing of just how the Jets are. But, I like to think, obviously, the Saints' offensive line is much better than what they've got in Atlanta. I mean, that's just a given. The only things I really want to see is obviously protection is going to be huge. I want to see if the Jets do bring the blitz, which I think that'll happen. How does a guy like Latavius Murray fit in picking up the blitz? That's what I want to see, because Mark Ingram, a lot of people will talk about Mark Ingram being that change of pace guy or that fiery guy or that, catching passes out of the backfield. But in blitz pickups, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I saw Ingram. He grew over his career in New Orleans, but the last several years, there's been an extra second or two. It's because of Mark Ingram and his blocking in the backfield, just giving Drew that extra time. And so, whether it's cartwheeling a play or just picking it up, I want to see how Latavius Murray does against that. I don't want to see any issues and fumble snaps or communication between Eric McCoy and Drew Brees. I just want to kind of see a little tease of what Jared Cook and Brees bring to the table, because we've seen it in training camp and stuff. And I just want to see it in the game. So, again, I only want to see 1 or 2 series just because you've seen what's happened around the league with some of these guys getting injured. And, again, it's part of the game. But if you can serve it up as a precaution for some things, I think it's a good thing. I even have problems with Taysom Hill taking majority of snaps just because, he's a good versatile weapon. Same thing with Teddy Bridgewater and just playing. You just don't want to see any of those guys go down in third or fourth preseason game.
Speaking of Taysom Hill.
Oh, no.
You mean Steve Young?
Yeah, Steve.
Part 2?
Steve. Hey, John, I call him Steve Young-ish. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that, man.
They both went to BYU.
Well, that's a good point. Real good point. Have we been seeing more do you think we will see more of him in different type of packages, like more at probably tight end or wide receiver this season as well, to take advantage of his speed?
Yeah, I think you'll see similar role out of him. I think what's been good for him is I think it's 2 games now. He's just looked completely different as a quarterback. And, I'll never forget after the first preseason game, he was talking about how happy he was just to be able to play quarterback and how good it felt. And I thought he's looked much better in the pocket. He's looked better going through his progressions, his reads. And, that's encouraging if they throw him in the backfield as an actual quarterback, just because last year everybody's like, ooh, don't let him throw the football. I mean,
Right.
a couple of darts and stuff, but,
Yeah.
Again, it's just one of those things where if he gets his progression, if he's growing and he's doing some things in quarterback, that just gives Peyton another option as far as weaponry goes. And, he's going to always take that every day. But, again, you're going to still see Taysom Hill on special teams. You're still going to see him line up as a blocking tight end. They're still going to run gadget plays with him. So I don't expect his workload to really change too much. But, again, I think he's a player that's humble. He's going to do anything that the staff asks him to do, and he just wants to help this football team win football games.
Okay. My last question is that defensive line with Amniata and Malcolm Brown. Do you think we guys got some pretty good guys up front for the Who Dat Nation?
Yeah, I think so. And, look, unfortunately, you don't have Sheldon Rankins. That's a huge loss for this team. And, Cam Jordan always talks, he's the quarterback of the defense, and he's so smart to point out coverages and so smart to point out other things. Look, I think that it's going to be important how they come out of the gate, right? Because you're going to see no David Onyemata or Sheldon Rankins. Obviously, you're not going to see Sheldon Rankins probably till week 9, obviously.
Right.
But, look, I think Malcolm Brown's a guy that can fill in and do really good things. I don't think people talk about Taylor Stallworth enough. Ziggy Ansah, if they keep him, I'm sorry, did I say Ziggy? Ziggy Hood is who I meant.
Right. And he did pretty good against the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, look, those guys like that, maybe they carry him for a little bit, and, you just don't know what's going to end up happening. Mario Edwards Jr., obviously, he left to injury. You hope that's nothing serious because he's kind of one of those guys who can do interior or exterior as far as pass rush goes. And but I feel pretty good about what they've got. I don't think Taylor Stallworth is a guy that gets talked about it a lot. But I also feel like if they throw him in with Malcolm Brown or anything like that, I think it'll be good observations when you see him play. First 2 weeks, obviously, or first few weeks, you're going to be facing Lamar Miller and Deshaun Watson. You've got Jared Goff and Todd Gurley next week. Then you've got, Russell Wilson and whoever is going to split the backfield in Seattle. And then you got Dak, and then who knows? I mean, I don't know if it's Zeke or not. But, you're going to have some good rushing opponents on your hands. And, the biggest thing is getting Onyemata back is going to be huge because I think he can pair well with Malcolm Brown. But before that, I think you should be encouraged about what they have along the defensive line as long as Ryan Nielsen is running it.
John, the last question I have for you, and I presented it to Kyle and sort of answered it myself, and I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say. Coming in, all off season, everybody, all of us included, had the Saints at the top or near the top of the heap of Super Bowl contenders. Have you seen anything from this team this preseason to make you think otherwise?
No, I don't think so. And look, I think it's never going to be about how this team starts. It's going to be how they finish. Winning divisions is always going to be your first priority, and then they'll work out the rest for it, And, Atlanta, I think, is going to be obviously a stiffer competition, and we say that. We know that just because you just can't really count those guys out. Carolina, it's just going to depend on Cam Newton. I don't know if there's enough there for them to really threaten. And then everybody has been saying that Tampa is going to turn this thing around for the past 6 years. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens there. But, look, I think this is still one of the top teams in the NFC. I think this is an actual legitimate Super Bowl contender. Obviously, I think the Rams probably are favored. But other teams like the Bears have been projected. I don't get that one. I mean, defense can carry you so far. But, look, I got to see more out of Chicago before I say, hey, look, I'm going to take them really seriously as a Super Bowl contender. But, look, I think New Orleans is a huge favorite. I think they definitely make the playoffs. And, again, it's going to depend on how things fall and how the chips fall. So I feel good about this team and their makeup. You would have asked me a couple of years ago, I've been like, nope, it's a pipe dream. But, look, I think you look at everything that's happened the past couple of years and how they've been able to overcome the adversity, overcome so much. This is a team that was supposed to be out of it because of the Minnesota Miracle. That didn't happen, and now they got to go up against another one against the no call. So I think you're going to see a lot of good things. Maybe not the dominant 13-3 season like last year, but you'll still see a good football team out there.
All right, good stuff. John, thank you so much, man. And, of course, tell the people how they can be able to follow you on the World Wide Web.
Absolutely, yep. Follow me on Twitter at John J. Hendrix. That's Hendrix just like Gimme. Definitely love to interact. You can check out all the work on CanalStreetChronicles.com, part of the SB Nation family. A lot of great things going there. Very talented staff that we have there. And then, obviously, check me out on Forbes Sports, doing some more stuff for them as the season progresses and working on some season previews and all that good stuff in there.
Oh, good, man. Congratulations. How the youngins?
Oh, they're fantastic. We're going to start at school this week, and everybody's in school. Mom's in school. She's back to teaching, and all of them are in school with her. So it's kind of nice sometimes around that now.
Well, good, man. Beautiful family, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, and we appreciate you taking some time out of your family and your busy schedule, my friend. And it definitely always enjoy reading your work, and love working for you. I appreciate everything you do for me and for all of the New Orleans Saints Nation. Thank you so much,
man. That's not what you said
appreciate
last week.
Yeah.
Now, Bob, that's not what you said last week.
Oh, come on.
All right.
Bob projected this multiple personality syndrome about him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He could have said that he was going to murder people last week, and then this week he's all hunky dory. So I don't know.
Yeah, he's still saying he's the most prettiest out of all you guys. So anyway. All right, John. Good talking to you, buddy.
All right, guys. I'll be good.
All right. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye.
Be well.
That's funny. All right, bud. Any last thoughts, comments for everybody?
You know what? I mean, just like John and you yourself pointed out earlier in the show, take these preseason games, for what they're worth. The wins and losses don't mean anything. And let's hope that the injuries that have happened aren't serious. And we get to see certain things out of the first unit. I'm in agreement with both you and John. I don't think we need to see very much from the top units on either the offense or defense this weekend. But I'd like to see a couple good, solid series from them. This team is getting ready for the regular season. They're a veteran seasoned team, that knows what they need to do to get to the end. And they're just, Kyle, they're anxious for the regular season. So let's get through these next couple weeks It's fun to debate the roster bubble players and who's going to make the 53-man roster and things like that. But like you and John pointed out a little bit ago, there's nothing that any one of us has seen to make us think that this New Orleans Saints team is not going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. And let's just keep focused on that.
Rosters, especially a team with a veteran coach, will always be in flux.
Yes.
Injuries, whatever, negative circumstances, things of that nature always happen in the National Football League. We should be ready for it. But if you have a stable staff like the Saints have, if you have good coaches, very good coaches, like with and the sub coaches with Pete Carmichael, Nielsen, Aaron Glenn, and those guys, you have real good talent. And Joe Lombardi, I forgot him. You got good talent across the board, right? Mm-hmm. And you have a good front office. You have a great owner. We have a great fan base. So everything you look at New Orleans and you put it together, you have to say winner. You know, I remember the day we couldn't even say chicken dinner. So, you know, it's good to see what we do have, man. I come from the era where I was in that Superdome where people were wearing bags on their heads, you know. I was in that Superdome where even we didn't have one win yet. We were there still selling out the dome, hoping for a win. So now I think this generation, when you look at the success the Saints have given us over the past 13 seasons, you want more of a course, you know, and you expect more after you're tasting that Super Bowl. You want to get back to it. And here we are 10 seasons later, right back at it, an opportunity to go back to Miami, an opportunity to win it again. So will we have a 13-3 season? I don't know. Will it be 12-4, whatever, 11-5, whatever? I think the Saints can't go no less than 11-5 in order to get back into the playoffs. They can't do it like they did that first season that he brought us to the NFC Championship at 10-6. I don't think you're going to see any team being able to get there like that unless, you know, you have a debacle like you had that year with the Seattle Seahawks and those guys. and that whole division was just not a very good division. But this NFL has more parity. I believe the talent across the board, if you look at from team to team to team, of course you're going to have some teams that are going to struggle, right? But I think you also have some teams that may surprise you. And we can't let down our guard. We have to do our job. We have to control our own destiny. And if the team needs a slogan, that's pretty much it. Control your own destiny. Don't allow anyone else, no referee, no injury, no fee, anything, control it. Just control your own destiny. Okay?
For sure.
All right, Bobo, how can everybody find you on the World Wide Web?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I am blessed and fortunate enough to work for Mr. John Hendrix and those wonderful boys over at Canal Street Chronicles. Canal Street Chronicles can be followed on Facebook or Twitter at Saint CSC. I can be followed individually, and I post all of my articles on my individual pages as well. Facebook, Bob Rose, or Twitter at BobbyR2613. As most of you who are listening right now, at least I hope know, Kyle and I have our own Twitter page for the Bayou Blitz. It's at Bayou Blitz 412. And we have our own Facebook page as well, and Facebook group. So just go on to Facebook and Google Bayou Blitz. And if you have any trouble finding it, give Mr. Mosley or myself a shout out and we will guide you. It's a very interactive group, very informative and very supportive of one another. And we want to thank you guys and show our love for everything that you have done for us. It means so much. to you, Kyle, I know, and to definitely myself as well. So thank you folks so much.
Definitely. And our prayers go out to the families of Governor Blanco, as well as Nancy Parker, as well as Mr. Augustus, who was the pilot who she was doing a story on when the plane experienced some mechanical issues. And also the fisherman, the popular Louisiana fisherman, Mr. Bourgeois, he also was killed in a plane crash on Sunday. So the Louisiana, southern Louisiana area has been hit by some tremendous tragedy over the past past week, I should say. And just pray for those families. It's never easy to lose a loved one. And it's never easy to lose someone like Nancy Parker, who's, after 23 years being in the New Orleans area, raising a family. I know my uncle knew her husband very well and his family, and just be with those guys and watch over them because she had kids who now they lost their mother. And God has his omnipotent way of handling life, and we just have to be able to go with it. But I would say also, Saints fans, don't forget, you can be able to follow Saints News Network at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com, and you can also check us out on Twitter, Instagram, as well as on Facebook at Saints News. And when you go to saintsnewsnetwork.com, it's going to be Barry Hurst's and all of his featured columns and his opinions, and you're going to probably see some writings from Kyle T. Mosley, who is that guy, this year as well. So support us, and let's see what's going to happen, and hopefully we can get Bob to do a guest piece and what have you, steal you from John if he allowed that. We'll see how that goes. But and one last thing, support the team. And I know it's easy. Everybody has their opinion. It's still preseason. Support the team. Everybody. We're going to see some of those young men lose their jobs over the next couple of weeks. Let's support them wherever they go. And I think we have a really good team this season, and you don't hear a whole bunch of bickering and nonsense going on. So that's always great to have. And that's a great sign to have also, Bob, coming up in a challenging season that the New Orleans Saints will have. All right, Bob, tell Lauren and Will I said hello and give them hugs for me. Man, Saints fans and Who-Dats, you guys be classy. Stay classy, as Ron Burgundy would say. And, Bobo, we are out of here. Who-Dat, baby. Take care. Bye.
Who-Dat.